Hi everyone, I'm Laura and this is Sarah from Duo, and we are in week 4 of our Leaders Who Lead Navigating Your Business Through Uncertainty series. So this week we are going to be talking about driving a culture of change. One thing that we've noticed with this is there's definitely businesses that drive change, positive change, on a fairly regular basis are definitely finding it easier to work and help navigate their team through uncertainty. And we are really looking at what are some of the commonalities there. And I think overall it's that their team are just more open to change in general. So when forced change comes in, even if it's not always positive, the impact is slightly less on the team. So we just wanted to talk about some of the things that we're seeing and maybe some techniques to use. So Sarah, do you want to talk about the piece around different people dealing with change in different ways and how that impacts how people buy in?
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously one of the things that we spend a lot of time working on with our clients is around people's behaviors and what drives them to react and behave in a certain way. So, as you just said, people will adapt to change differently. So, from a behavioral standpoint, firstly, you've got to think about yourself as a leader and how well do you adapt to change, and how do you respond to it. And then obviously then you've got to think about your team and your business collectively too. So from a behavioral standpoint, there's 3 different levels of change if you imagine it on a scale. So on one end of the scale, there are people who really don't really thrive on change. They prefer for things to stay the same, and they don't like to upset the status quo. So that those are the kind of people who really wouldn't be looking for change and actually might respond negatively to change, and it might make them feel really uneasy. So those types of people, we refer to that as sameness. As sameness people, they like things to stay the same. The middle point really is around people who like change, but they like it for improvement's sake. So they're the types of people who really thrive on looking at continuous business development. How do they improve? How do they make changes in the business for driving change for improvement's sake? And for those types of people, they are okay if they understand what's behind the change and if they think it's going to drive positive improvement.
Yeah.
So obviously even those people currently, because this is forced change and it's not necessarily easy to link this current situation with improvements, excuse me, even those kinds of people might be finding it difficult to adapt to the current situation. The opposite, the further end of the scale, that's really people who love change. They actually almost are radical about it. They love things, even change for change's sake. They like that spontaneity. They like to be the first people to do something. So they're the kinds of people that are really motivated by change. But during uncertainty, so times of uncertainty, if you're wanting to build a culture where people respond well to change, you really need to consider what kind of mix have you got in your business and how do you communicate to be able to encourage and get the buy-in across those different types of people. And if you're of one particular side of the scale, you have to remember that just because you would respond in a certain way, not to anticipate that everybody will react the same way as you would. Yeah. So really, if you're looking at driving a culture where change is really embraced, you need to be mindful that it will take some people longer than others to be able to respond to that change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the other piece of that is thinking about strategically around a change before you embed it. Now, we appreciate there's 2 types of change. There's planned change and then there's forced change. Currently, we're in a period of forced change. So it's more difficult to do. But again, if we're thinking about getting your team into a culture of change where they're ready, when you make planned changes, it's about thinking about them in a certain way. So first of all, thinking about what's the purpose and making sure that people understand the purpose, because often it's you have those discussions at a leadership level behind closed doors, and when the change is rolled out, people don't really understand what the purpose of that is, and making the purpose relevant to their job. So we sometimes use the example of we looked at a project around reducing print costs, and that's a change for people. And actually what the business at the time was doing, they were making it relevant at the top layer of the business, so it's to save the business money. Well, that's great at a leadership level, but how do you buy people into that? Because that's not enough for individuals. So actually, how does it impact individual people and their jobs? What does that money give them? If it's saving the business money, does that mean there's more money for training and development? Does that mean there's more money for salary increases? Does that mean there's more money to bring in new people into the business dynamic? Make the change and the purpose of the change relevant to the people that you're trying to instill it with. Make sure it resonates with people's values and beliefs. It's a really interesting one around, we've done lots of change work with businesses where they've made a change, but people haven't connected it with it being in line with their values and beliefs. Just often it is, but it's, you need to make that link. We are changing the way we do something, however, our values behind doing that thing are still the same, so that people still buy in at a belief level. We talk all the time around change isn't sustainable by just changing structural aspects. You have to change and impact change at the level of values, beliefs, and behavior, because change is individual. And if you don't get individuals to change how they believe or how they behave, the change won't stick. It'll probably stick for a really short period of time, and then people will go back to how they were. So that sort of final layer is that behavioral layer. What is the change going to mean to behaviors in your business? Because just saying we're going to change this process, if you don't spell out what that means from a behavioral standpoint, the likelihood is that there'll be lots of fluctuation in how people change or how people engage with it, because you haven't really outlined the behaviors that need to change. We're obviously a little bit biased on the behavioral side because that's everything that we do, but that's where we've seen change really stick with clients. And even through uncertainty in unplanned stuff, we've been doing lots of work with clients on looking at the behavioral level of their business and what needs to change behaviorally to get people on board with this uncertainty that we're going through. So that's still a technique you can use now. Buy in at the behavioral level, because that's what's going to help people get through this.
Yeah. And we talk about this being a cultural thing. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. You can't just switch on a change button and say, right, everybody's going to love change now. Like, it doesn't work like that. This takes time. It takes effort, but the benefits of it are huge. And one of the things that we absolutely are massive advocates of is really about, and we've seen this work, is really about getting involvement from a cross section of the business if you're looking at projects that require the wider business to make changes. So we sometimes run in different businesses that we work with, we help businesses set up culture clubs, or whatever you want to call them, but culture clubs where they take a cross section of the business, and things that are going to impact people within the business, those types of topics and initiatives and things that potentially are big changes will get taken to the culture club and discussed, and then they will be a central point, a representation of the business, and then they will then go out and reach out to the wider business to be able to inform and help get buy-in during the whole process of the change, rather than it just being someone from a leadership perspective making a decision, or a leadership team making a decision and then announcing the change. Now, we appreciate sometimes you have to be reactive depending on things that are going on in the marketplace, or certainly with current situation, changes have had to happen that you haven't been able to follow that kind of process. However, where you can, it can be really beneficial, particularly for those people who are more reluctant to change. The earlier you get them on board, the more likely that they're going to be able to embrace the change when you actually need to sort of implement it. We like to suggest to people to look at people who are sort of sit in the middle and really embrace improvements and change. They're great change ambassadors within the business. Get those people to influence and stimulate a culture where people are okay to talk about change in a positive manner, and actually to start to get people to think that, you know, what's behind the change, what's the purpose, as Laura has just said, but also what does it mean for them, and really help and set that context. So change ambassadors and there's some, you know, every business has great change ambassadors, so they're great people to help the leadership team be able to drive initiatives forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, every business can make different levels of change, and for some businesses, you know, they make change very regularly through innovation or depending on what your products and services are. But other businesses that are maybe more traditional, you might think, well, how do we make change on an ongoing basis? What we're not saying is that you need to make large scale changes continuously. In fact, that can actually have a detrimental impact, because what you want to do is show your team that they can adapt well to change. That's the piece, really. So making small purposeful changes for improvement's sake, that's really what we're looking at here. So that could be everything from changing how you do a meeting, because actually the old way is not that great, or changing a piece in your client services process, changing a small piece around your internal culture, or a small piece around how people go out and business develop. You know, the small pieces, looking at essentially what are some of the things in your business that aren't that efficient, and how could you maybe change and tweak that process, get people on board with those small changes, just to really at a subconscious level get them used to making change on a fairly regular basis for the positive. And that's really what will drive that when it comes to large scale change that you have to either purposefully impact, or potentially, you know, uncertainty that maybe was more of a forced change. If people have more positive experience with smaller changes, they will be more likely to be more resilient around large scale change.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like once you know that you're able to be resilient during times of change, you then become more open-minded to change, positive change moving forward. Absolutely.
So we have put together, as always, a workbook that sits around this with some models, including mapping out where you and your team sit on the change scale, and also a little grid around that you can run through whenever you're looking at making change. How do you cross-check and make sure that you've gone through the layers that you need to go through for maximum impact? So click the link, you can find it below, or it will be on our LinkedIn company page to access those downloads and the rest of the series. And we will see you next week. Thank you.